being a whole human leader is that one, we ourselves show up as our whole human selves, and also seeing that in our teams as well. So that's recognizing everything that people bring to the table, their diverse, not just work experiences, whether in different companies, different countries, different functions, but that the lived experience they have and maybe different cultures, languages, all those things is so rich in creating a much better workforce. So I bring all of those things together. I talk about the shift for me. A nickname I got early into my executive career is the Iron Maiden. I didn't show up with a lot of emotion or vulnerability. I wore this mask. I'm all business all the time. And to my evolution to what is now I'm called the turtle. I still have a very thick exterior shell, but I am very soft in the inside, and I let people see that.
Welcome to the Grow and Learn podcast, your go-to source for expertise and insights on a variety of topics: business growth, leadership, technology, personal and business finance, and more. We've curated a vast network of business experts ready to address your company's most pressing challenges. Reach out to us for more information or schedule a call at grownlearn.org to explore how we can support you. Welcome to Grow and Learn, Curious Minds. Today I'm speaking to TEDx speaker, and not only TEDx speaker, author, executive consultant. She's the one who opened TEDx Florida this year, Victoria Pelletier. I'm welcoming her today to speak about her new book. She's an amazing woman. You may have heard about her because she's been on major magazines in the US, major programs, and she has more than 20 years of executive experience. I'm welcoming Victoria.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure to have you back again. I've had you more than a year ago, and a lot of things transpired ever since. You wrote 2 books. Tell us a bit about this experience.
Yeah, so I left my last company a little over a year ago, and I had a verbal offer to go to another firm that unfortunately fell through when the CEO of that company got fired. So I was like, well, shoot. So I guess now I'm on the job market and I have some time and capacity on my hands. And I had been thinking about writing a book. I've now written 3. The first one was just I was a co-author to that one. I contributed the chapter to a book called Unstoppable. And so I thought, okay, well, now I can put pen to proverbial paper. And I was having a difficult time debating between 2 topics. One was around personal branding, and the other is around leadership and culture, because they're so close to my heart in terms of things I speak on regularly. So I made the decision to do both, which in retrospect, like, I bit off a lot. It was, not even so much the actual writing process. I'm thankful I had a large team around to help with editing and all those pieces, but even just the marketing of it, et cetera. So my husband has joked that he believes I've been almost like busier in my unemployment than in my employment because of those activities, because of my speaking activities. And then I've been doing, a lot of coaching and some consulting as well. So it's been a very busy year, soon to come to an end as I'm accepting another executive role. And then I'll continue to do on a smaller scale some of those other activities.
Mm-hmm. So you're continuing with your consulting and speaking activities.
I mean, the consulting is the one that will drop off because I am moving into a consulting business. So I, definitely need to honor, that I couldn't be in competition in any way. Or if it is consulting and it's in a very, very different space. So I'm moving back into more like technology and change focused type, businesses. I will continue. I've always offered career executive coaching or personal brand coaching. That's likely what will, continue. But just again, I'll have fewer clients. Normally I only have 1 or 2 at a time. And then keynote speaking, that's actually a big part of what I do in terms of sort of my side business. And thankfully this company sees value in that, will want to leverage it as well. So speaking on their behalf, and then also I'll have the opportunity to still do some other things for myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're an expert in culture, diversity, organizational development, human resources. What is the last book about? The latest one, The Power of Whole Human Leadership, that
Yes.
came out just now in September?
It came out 1 week ago today. So I'm very
Congratulations.
proud to say it's like #1, best new release, and it's hit #1 in its category. So I'm thankful to everyone who's bought, downloaded, or listened to the book. I did the audio, and this one is a culmination of some of what you just said, that I'm a leader in. And so the power of whole human leadership is, me trying to put down the pivot and lessons I've made as a leader in my career, and what I've seen the workforce is clamoring for in terms of their expectations of leaders in business now. And so in the book, I talk about, that being a whole human leader is that, one, we ourselves show up as our whole human selves, and also seeing that in our teams as well. And there's many facets to what that means. Everything from, how we lead with empathy, with vulnerability, the authenticity we need to have in how we show up and how we communicate. There's other elements of it. And interestingly, as I read some of the reviews, the only negative reviews I have on the book are those who do not like my focus on also looking at the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But that's also about the whole human self. And so that's recognizing everything that people bring to the table. They're diverse, not just work experiences, whether in different companies, different countries, different functions, but that the lived experience they have, and maybe different cultures, languages, all those things is so rich in creating a much better workforce. So I bring all of those things together. I talk about the shift for me. A nickname I got early into my executive career is the Iron Maiden. I didn't show up with a lot of emotion or vulnerability. I wore this mask. I'm all business all the time. And to my evolution to what is now I'm called the turtle. I still have a very thick exterior shell, but I am very soft in the inside, and I let people see that. So it's a book of lessons. I talk about my failures, what I've learned from those, and helping current or aspiring leaders to step into the world of leadership in the way that I think the modern workforce is looking for today.
Everybody seems to have a different spin on what exactly leadership is, and even what you're talking about, how to bring yourself authentically to work. And everybody takes a different aspect from this whole person. Some perceive it in a different way. What would you say makes your approach different than what is available out there? I mean, you mentioned what the components are of the whole person, but other than being authentic, is there something that a person needs to develop in themselves other than show that entails becoming a leader?
Yeah, I think I do think that there's something that the leaders themselves need to do for themselves and not just for their teams. And there's a significant amount, I believe, of like self-reflection and awareness. In fact, you mentioned that I opened the TEDx Miami event, and I actually spoke on healthy resilience. And we can be very resilient in life, at work, but not in what I refer to as a healthy manner. And I don't think I always have the healthy manner. Just dealing with all of the adversity, challenge that comes our way, never processing it. Or in this case, I have 5 steps for, developing healthy resilience. The second of those is really important to being a successful leader: self-awareness and self-reflection. And then the next step in that, so the third step in my resilience journey, is around what I refer to as strategic intentionality. And this is once you have been very like self-reflective, and you understand like your own emotions, the fear oftentimes is, I think, what holds people back from being this kind of leader. When we talk about being empathetic and vulnerable, that's not comfortable or natural for many. And it wasn't for me 20 years ago when I learned I had this Iron Maiden nickname. And so the work that I think leaders need to do for themselves is gaining comfort and confidence in their own lived experience. And the strategic intentionality is then, how do you move towards, with that experience, with all that self-reflection, how do you move and achieve the goal or objective you've set for yourself? What strategies do you need to develop? And then the intentions and the actions you take daily. And that's everything from the way you think to the way you speak to the way you act in business. So that's the work that I think the leaders need to do for themselves before they can be really effective in leading others down that path.
Mhm. In your experience, do you believe that a leader can be effective in any environment, or is there a difference between different companies, environments? Maybe you cannot exhibit or develop in the same way, or you cannot even reflect in the same manner in one environment. I don't know. What is your opinion?
I don't think, all leaders are cut out for all environments. Absolutely. I think I think the leadership of people should be something that I think can translate into different environments, but in what kind of environment? Is it one where it's much more of a status quo, less transformational, just more about slow and steady growth that requires a particular kind of mindset? Like, I will tell you, I am not a status quo girl at all. I will break something just to put it back together again. I would get bored in those environments, but there's some that enjoy that. I also can tell you, I am not a startup girl. Although I've consulted and coached people in that environment, I personally don't want to do that as my full-time day job, even though I actually have bought very small businesses and even started some myself. That's not the core of who I am. And I know that. But there's some who thrive in that, who want to wear 15 hats, which you need to in a startup kind of environment, that scrappiness that comes. And then there's also, the big corporate, which is where I've spent a lot of my career, highly matrixed and complex. I know how to operate an environment. It doesn't mean I love all aspects of that, but because I like challenge, some of that added layer of like complexity and the matrix is something that like excites me and like challenges me in my brain. And so and there's so many other different types of like environments. But that's not going to work for everyone. And so again, I think you as a leader need to be really, as an individual, let's just say, you need to be really clear on what you're good at, what do you enjoy, where can you go and where can you be compensated? That's actually the Japanese philosophy of ikigai, and there's more. There's like multiple circles beyond the ones that I've talked about, but those I think are some of like what brings you joy and passion in the work that you do, which may not necessarily be exactly aligned with what you enjoy doing. Like, I can tell you there are things I can do exceptionally well, but I'm no longer excited to do those on a full-time basis. So I craft a role and an environment that makes sense. And I think when you as an individual are in an environment where you believe you thrive, that's where you can help support the team much more effectively in helping them on their journey.
You mentioned ikigai, and I've only heard about it fleetingly. Is this something that you're talking about in your book, or is it based on some of the concepts, or are you trained in it?
I actually don't talk about it in the book, but I talk about it's something I regularly speak to when I'm coaching individuals around their own career journey and even around their personal brand. It's around like, a lot of people define themselves by what they do for work. And that's only one part of a holistic brand strategy. And so for me, it's also what do you want to be known for? And it's kind of marrying. So I bring the concept of ikigai to a variety of situations, like brand coaching, like career coaching, to people to marry that. But no, I don't specifically. It actually would have been, it's interesting to think about that, in terms of this leadership book, but it was very, very focused on that slice. So I didn't bring it, but I just think it's a phenomenal philosophy. And I encourage people to think deeply about that. I find there's many people who are miserable in their roles because they're not excited by the stuff that I've used the word joy for a very long time. And I don't know what percentage of your listeners are in the US, but in the US, it's recently being used for some of the political conversations. They've taken that word. I've been using it for a long time. I do not do things that don't bring me personal or professional joy or value. There's some stuff that still needs to get done, and I say no. I delegate, I outsource. So again, I think, thinking about ikigai in terms of what do we do? What do we enjoy? What skills are we good at? And then also what we can get paid to do. And paid, that's something, another thing I'd say separately is definition of success and wealth is to be determined by the individual. And so as long as you're comfortable, like my son, I paid for him to go to college and like take computer engineering since he was a child, and he's not working in that field, which could earn him significantly more than what he does today. But at the end of the day, he's happy and he's, can afford the lifestyle that he currently wants.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited to introduce a groundbreaking service we're offering in collaboration with our partners, InnoAnalytiX. This service is designed to help you identify bottlenecks and uncover low-hanging fruits for innovation within your organization. InnoAnalytiX performs a comprehensive assessment through a digital questionnaire that we distribute to your employees. The result is a detailed dashboard that highlights key innovation indicators and areas where improvement is needed. Armed with these insights, we from Grownlearn will connect you to the ideal consultant, trainer, coach, or speaker from our global network of top-tier experts to address any gaps and drive growth. Don't forget to check out the links in the description for special offers from our partners, including a free LinkedIn profile assessment. Now enjoy the next segment of this Grownlearn podcast episode. So what else is in the book, and what propelled you to write a second book after you wrote another one earlier this year?
So, this book is chapter by chapter. I go through, there's 10, and I talk through a variety of elements related to, being this whole human leader. At the end of each chapter, I have just key takeaways. So like it's digestible. So you're like here, not that I want people skimming through the book, but like you'll see pretty clear takeaways. And I also leave people with questions. And I also talk about the importance of and balance between critical thinking, the more facts, figure, like historical, how things have operated and how we make decisions in business, with emotional intelligence and like bringing those together. And so you'll see that in each of the chapters. And so I decided to write it. As I said, I actually struggled when I knew I wanted to write a book between the two topics, just because I'm asked to speak on both of them. And so I decided to do both. The first was Influence Unleashed, which is the personal branding book, and that came out in January of this year. And then this one, although I will tell you, I invested heavily in this book in terms of like the time, the effort, actually the incredible like graphic artist and illustrator that did the cover and the illustrations that are inside. I actually found it, even I do the narration for the audiobooks. Mm-hmm. And I even found this one more difficult than the last. This one's slightly higher word count, but it was just because it's so personal to me, and I just see, and so the why for doing both of them, and this one very much in particular, is because I see so many leaders, organizational psychologists, whomever, talking about the importance of these kinds of traits in leadership, yet I don't actually see many executing. In large part because as I said earlier, I think it's difficult. Some of what you're asking for feels uncomfortable and unnatural for some leaders. Like even when I entered the workforce, it was about command and control and hierarchy. And I didn't see a lot from my own leaders, a lot of what I'm now talking about. And so that's why I wanted to write this book. But I also did it from a place of, again, I'm sharing personal examples of how I pivoted from that kind of leadership to this kind of leadership today with, although I changed all the names, but real life examples of people that I've worked with in situations. Some of them were failures, and I talk about what I learned from that, and others were great successes, but I needed to really focus on some elements of what I talked about in the book.
Mm-hmm. I've also worked in a large corporation, and I also have an experience as an entrepreneur. So my question now is, when you are considering those two very different environments, and when you say, I want to be flexible, I want to make a change in a corporate environment, I want people to be able to express themselves, to be aligned, but at the same time, there's this top-down control. Yes, you need to navigate in the matrix, but this environment requires a completely, let's say, it doesn't tolerate so much flexibility at times. It depends really, but the level of tolerability of people who want to make a change is a bit less, I would say, based on my experience. Maybe it depends on the company also. So the advice that you give in the book, is it applicable to the environments you have experience in mostly, or can I say, yeah, it applies also to entrepreneurs, it applies to...
Yeah, and in this, I think it applies to all. In this
Yeah.
case, I don't talk specifically about the work environment or type of organization. It's very much focused on how we are as a leader leading people. That said, I do talk about times of significant change. But again, that's applicable to like both the entrepreneurial or the large corporate. Like I reference having, like I've been a part of many mergers and acquisitions in my career, and the change and the reorganization, I reference some of those, and that might be much more on big corporate, but really when you think about the things that are, involved in that kind of shift and transformation, very much you can see that for entrepreneurs and the journey that they're in as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can you share one story from the book, and maybe not an entire story, briefly some of the morals of the story, the end of the chapter?
Well, I'll share two quickly. So one as sort of building off that last one around kind of change, and this one happened to be, it was early into my shift from the Iron Maiden, like just a couple of years in. So I don't think I certainly hadn't perfected, and by far I don't think I'm perfect. I'm much further on an ongoing journey. I think I was 30 years old. I had been relocated to New York. I'm originally from Canada, after we acquired some companies, and I was leading North America, and it was in an industry that I was newer to. And there was a woman that was reporting to me who was twice my age, had been her entire, like probably worked for 40 years in this industry. And I remember she just kind of came in and was like, who's this young Canadian thing? And she's New Yorker, so like who questioned everything about me. I could have easily changed the structure. I actually needed to reduce some of the senior leadership structure. But after conversations with team and client, and she managed a very important client portfolio, I knew how critical it was. This was not going to be, there was no reorganizationing her out of the business. And this one, it was a real exercise in patience for me as well, because it took me close to a year to fully get her secured and on board with me as her leader and with the changes that we were doing. And this was a lot of what I talk about in the book in terms of like empathy and conversation and working to build trust. So that's one. And then the other one is, I refer to in one chapter about the unseen employee. And this is actually where I would talk a little bit more around the importance of diversity and equity and inclusion, but the importance of the leader to learn more about the experiences of our workers. And so I shared a story of, I was working in contact centers and outsourced contact centers, which tend to not be viewed as maybe the destination job for people when you're new to a country, you're unemployed or underemployed. It's a place people land, which means they don't stay there a long time. So it's a challenging environment. And so I worked in, and I happened to meet this one gentleman who he's a like two-time award-winning or like ring for the Canadian Football League. But he was now later in his career and could no longer play football. And here he was working in this contact center. But I saw great potential, and people were sort of a little scared and drawn to him at the same time. He's this huge, football player, really intimidating, yet also a very, very handsome man. So we had like lots of things happening in our work environment. But what people didn't expect when they saw him by judging him from his appearance was how amazing he was with customers. And I ended up giving him, he would have been not a typical hire for me. I moved to a different company, and I was hiring for a client owning role, not just like now on the phones talking to people. And I put him into that role. I knew he had this big deficit of skills related to like just understanding the metrics and the operational piece, but his ability to manage relationships and people. So I invested in him, in upskilling him in those areas because I saw his potential. And I'm very happy to say I'm still connected to this man 6 years later, and he's soon to retire in that same field, that I had moved him into. So that for me is a success story, but this is also why I want people to look at people very differently and see potential, and create opportunity, and not always hire for the people that meet 10 out of the 10 skills we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In your positions, were you always in full control over the person you hire or you promote, or was there some control from above or from HR? Did you have
Yeah,
full
well,
control?
no. And so a lot of the time I am, but particularly in these matrixed structures, there's many times where, the individual that I'm leading has a dual reporting line to maybe it's the person that owns the geography and I own a business unit. And so that's created some challenge. And so that's where you really need to work through influence with peers and others, and where maybe they don't report directly to you in an HR system. But you need to be able to have those kind of conversations. And this is an important, piece, Serena, in the book where I talk about being an empathetic, a vulnerable leader does not mean you trade strong, solid performance management and business results. I actually think one can very much influence the other. And so, if I were to go back and tell my 24-year-old self, and that's when I took my first executive role, that it was okay to be vulnerable, that it was okay to be my authentic self and share my own stories with people, and how much that built trust and connection and relationships with people. I don't know if my 24-year-old self would have listened to me, but that's part of why I wrote the book. Because I think when you have this kind of leadership, again, you build that trust with people who are then much more open to receive the radical candor, the sometimes difficult feedback that you need to give. And that's even more important when you're not always in direct control and you need to work through these very, matrix, complex, structured environments.
Mm-hmm. How do you go about being more empathetic and being yourself more authentic? Is it by sharing and asking people for their personal stories, or what is your number one tactic?
I don't know that there's one. There's probably two. And so it is about sharing my own stories. So people see that I'm trusting them with stories, and I'm wanting to share more, and I'm wanting it to be more than just about business, that it's a real relationship. And the second is about curiosity. It's about understanding more about them. And into the curiosity is asking questions, but sometimes, and this is where I think as a leader, you need to listen a little bit more, because sometimes people are going to be afraid to share. And so asking the right questions, and probing and trying to pull stuff out sometimes, that again, ultimately, builds trust. A few weeks ago, I was traveling for some meetings, and, I was talking to this one senior leader, and the fact that, and he shared with me some things he said he's never shared with anyone, but it was because he saw the vulnerability and how open I was, that he felt safe to share that with me. So again, I think it's both, be open, be transparent to the extent that, you can or you're comfortable with, but be curious.
I've spoken to quite a few people that are in either leadership positions or have been in leadership positions and are now coaching and consulting advisors. And many of them share similar stories to what you're sharing. Basically, they say the connections are made in the late hours, in the bar, where people share personal stories after a few drinks, as one example. So it seems that the way up the ladder, the corporate ladder, and to more effectiveness is actually to open up personally, to rather it's not even that much. I mean, you need to be professional, clearly, but there's more prevalence of the personal connection than the professional skills that you bring. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's both. I mean, you need to clearly perform, but I even think about sponsorship. Sponsorship is earned. Whereas mentors, you can be paired with mentors, but it's earned based. So for me, if I choose to sponsor someone, and by that I mean I'm advocating for someone when they're not in the room. I'm doing that because of a few things. They're performers. I see their potential, but I also know them as a human, their values, their integrity, those sorts of things. And that last bit comes when you do get to know them, much more personally. So I think you do need to know both. And it's interesting. I listened to news podcasts when I get to the gym in the morning, and so today they were talking about how Amazon is demanding 5 days back in the office, no more like hybrid working. I'm not a fan of that. I think we should create a hybrid work environment. But what I am a fan of is hybrid work environments versus fully remote for the very reason we're just discussing. I do think that kind of conversation. Yes, you can do a little bit at the beginning of a Zoom call, but the proverbial water cooler conversation that just happens casually as you're walking by, or you go and grab a coffee or a drink after work with someone, like that's where some of that magic happens. And so that's where I do encourage, like, to make sure that we're still meeting face to face. We're having that, that kind of dialogue. That's where like I said, the magic happens, the relationships are formed, and also other things like the ability to be more creative and innovative when we're all together in a room.
So you don't believe that the times of the water cooler and of the after work drinks are over?
Oh, absolutely not.
Not.
Absolutely not. I think to be effective, can we get work done fully remote? Absolutely. We proved that during the pandemic, as the majority of us were working, except for essential workers, like work from home. Yes. But to grow ourselves as humans, our career, and potentially find like totally new and different opportunities, that's when the water cooler after work drinks are just so beneficial.
No, for sure they're beneficial. There's no doubt about it. I'm just wondering whether the corporate culture has not completely changed in the meantime during the pandemic.
I don't think it's completely changed. I don't. I mean, I think we're forever changed for sure. But I think this is where we're seeing this creeping back to, like, I think the pendulum swung so far to one side. I think it's swinging back, but I don't think it's ever going to go back to where it was. Like we're gonna, whatever that happy, middle ground is.
All right, fantastic. Do you want to share a few words about your first book? We completely neglected it, the branding one. What was it called again?
It's called Influence Unleashed, Forging a Lasting Legacy Through Personal Brand. And that one I chose to write because I've been, without having the words, the vernacular of personal brand, I started working on it 24 years ago. When I stepped into that first executive role, I came from like a business to consumer operational leadership roles to now leading all functions of that company as their chief operating officer and GM, everything except for finance. So sales, client management, it was in a B2B environment. We're responding to RFPs, and it's about creating some kind of a differentiation. And early on, I knew that people do business with people they liked, trusted, and therefore wanted to do business with. So again, without calling it that, I was trying to create strength of the company brand, my brand as the senior leader for that business, but then those on my team who were engaging with clients. And so it's been a very long journey for me. I'm fortunate to say that when I worked for IBM a number of years ago, LinkedIn had ranked me as the #1 social seller worldwide. And that's what LinkedIn's term, and it's more than brand. It's, your network, it's how you engage, it's many things. And IBM had asked me to develop personal brand training for its executives. So this is where, like, again, putting it all down on paper came about. And then I started to post like pandemic, there was such a rise in everyone's presence digitally. We had to, again, because we weren't at the water coolers. But I saw it being done really poorly. I saw this focus on just the one element that people think of when they think personal brand. What do I do? And I want to be known for what I do or the industry that I do it in. But a lot of, like, we're talking about the whole human, same thing with personal brand. In doing business with people you like and you trust, you need to know more about their credentials and what they're doing. And so for me, I wrote the book and spoke to the 4 foundations of personal brand. The first is the what do you do, and being able to speak to how you're effective and how and where you do it and successes you've had. The next is storytelling. Who are you as a human? What lived experience do you have? What are your values? What are your passions? What are your interests? Then the third one, very connected to the second, is what makes you different than people that do what you do. So all things being equal, and again, I spent a lot of time in management consulting, people with the same amount of, years of experience have done X number of engagements. Why would I choose one versus the other? Get really clear on what that is. So for me, I used the phrase earlier, radical candor. I operate with that. It's part of who I am and my storytelling, but it's also makes me very different in my field. Many consultants tell clients what they want to hear and not what they need to hear. So figure out what makes you different and start to talk about that as well. And then the last thing, the fourth one, is around legacy and impact. And what do you want to be known for? And that is a culmination of the whole human and who you are. Like when I die, I want it to be a footnote around the success I had in business and mergers and acquisitions and making companies money. I want it to be about who I was as a human. The fact that I hope that I will leave this world making workplaces, community, and the world at large a better place when I leave it than when I came into it. And that'll be my work around social justice, on DEI. I want it to be talking about that. I personally raised two really good humans in the world. And so like combining what you do with that end state in terms of like legacy and impact. And so I put it all down because, like I said, I saw so many getting it wrong. I see them sharing their company's marketing material. They're just talking, purely about their day job, and I know nothing about who they are. And so that was the first one. It came out in January. For your listeners, there's a companion workbook that's free on my website. So it actually takes you how to kind of work through a brand identity, like a framework, and get you thinking about that, crystallize it before you then sort of, go out there and march on social media and in real life with it.
Mm-hmm. What kind of posts do you personally post on LinkedIn other than the professional ones? Do you post pictures of your family, of your children?
I do try and keep it more professional, but with personal elements.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't generally post, and I do like to keep those like separate. LinkedIn is a professional network. And so there's not tons of those kinds of posts. However, there are things that I've shared. So I think a year and a half ago, I shared like horrific picture. Like I had a horrible like accident. I was in a wheelchair for months, like my face, I broke both arms, I shattered my knee, and I talked about that. And I shared a picture, that grabbed some headlines for sure. But I did it more to talk about resilience, which is connected to who I am as a human and I talk to other people and might coach them around. I have shared some collage photos, of like post-pandemic. I remember my husband and I with some masks on, going like picking up food. And I do think my kids have graced one or two pictures. But what you'll see is a blend of the elements I talked about. I will talk about the things I do for work. But I also talk about, values, and a lot of those are, as I mentioned, around social justice or DEI or being a certain kind of leader. So I might write an article or share other people's content with my thoughts around that. You see those. And so that's where I hope that everyone will see that, like, I lead from the front. I don't just, it's not just do as I say, but you'll see me leading in that way as well. So you'll see a broad mix of all of those things, but I also do coach people to keep the totally personal to their private Facebook or Instagram accounts.
Yeah, that's exactly why I was asking, because people are not very fond of personal information, but I guess it depends how you include it. When you share your values and your opinions about a certain topic, people still get to know you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic. Victoria, it was such a pleasure. I loved having you back. Could you share again the titles of the two books and where people can find them?
Absolutely. So, Serena, let me say thank you again for having me back. It's been a pleasure. And so the first book, the personal branding book, is called Influence Unleashed. The one that just came out last week on leadership and culture is called The Power of Whole Human Leadership. And your listeners can, buy, download, or listen wherever they get their books or their audio. But you can also find it on my website, which is where people can learn more about me. And if they want to connect on various social platforms from there, it's Victoria victoriapelletier.com.
Fantastic. Victoria, what can we expect from you this coming year?
Few things. So I'm in the process of accepting another executive role. So I'll be starting, at a new firm in the next number of weeks. I sit on one board, but I'm currently in talks for a couple of others. And I hope to, particularly given my TEDx talk, break open the doors to even more speaking engagements so that I can reach even more people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It was a pleasure listening to you, and insightful. Yeah, insightful. I'm going to implement some of the personal branding tips that you gave.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business, as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us, and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.